This is Contractor Sense with Ruth King.
Welcome to Contractor Sense. Here you discover ideas, tactics, news, and information that matters to your contracting business and you. I'm your host, Ruth King. This episode is sponsored by HVAC Trustbooks. Go to hvactrustbooks.com to discover how this tool can help you close more sales. Thank you for joining us. Here is how we will help your business and you today. We all exit our businesses. It is much better to plan our exit than to have it happen without our control. I once worked with a contractor in his 40s who had a massive heart attack and died with no succession planning. His wife didn't want to run the business, so she sold the business in pieces in a fire sale. Not exactly the way you want to exit. So these next two podcasts talk about succession and the potential for selling your business, whether it is to family, employees, or outsiders, what to prepare for, and what the sales process is like. My guest is Ashish Ashkalar, founder and CEO of Near You, a company whose vision is to be the best employer and provide the best customer service experience in the HVAC industry. In terms of full disclosure, I am an advisory board member to Near You. Ashish, welcome to Contractor Sense.
Thank you, Ruth. Good morning.
It is my pleasure to host you. We've been working together probably, about 2 years now? Close.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah, close to 2 years. Absolutely.
And you came to me with the vision and what you really wanted to do with the HVAC industry and really be the best in the HVAC industry and started the process. So, let's talk a little bit about, anybody who, it doesn't have to be HVAC, you guys could be plumbers or electricians or, pool and spa guys, generator guys, any contractor who wants to sell his or her business. What do they have to think about? What do they have to get ready? And we're going to talk through that in a lot of detail today, but the reality is they have to make the decision to sell first, right?
Yep, absolutely. Happy to dive into that, Ruth, and thanks for having me. As I think about Near You and when we got started, this was the primary driver of my endeavors in the beginning to understand how do contractors think about succession planning? How do they think about transitioning their business? And it dawned on me that because of the day-to-day sort of tactical responsibilities, a lot of business owners don't have the time to think about it. So I would say first, it's not an overnight thing, right? You have to prepare for it. Oftentimes it takes people anywhere from 1 to 2 years to prepare for a successful transition to, like you said, either employees or family members or outsiders. And how do you start thinking about it? The first process is to go through your financials and understand what are the areas of your business that would be attractive to a potential buyer, anyone that wants to take that on. And as you think about the profit and loss statement, you will start seeing things like what is your revenue mix made up of. Oftentimes, people try to chase the most convenient dollar, as a result of which your revenue mix tends to be more non-recurring, more choppy in nature. So as you think about transitioning your business and getting the most value for it, you need to focus on optimizing your revenue mix. And what I mean by that is more maintenance agreements, more recurring revenue, less revenue that is dependent on the economic cycle would make your business more attractive. Now that takes a while, right? So you can't fix that overnight. That is why I brought that up first. As you look at your profit and loss statement, there are expenses on the P&L that you need to really start separating the personal expenses that you may have been running through the business because of your ownership from the core business expenses. Because as people think about the value of your business, they're going to look at the bottom line and apply a multiple on that. So being able to separate the personal expenses from business expenses is a very important step. And I have no problem saying that despite Near You, one of Near You's core strategies to buy companies. I want our fellow contractors to benefit from this advice. So this is completely unbiased. So as you study the P&L and start thinking through how to optimize the revenue mix, how to make sure all the expenses are well categorized. The next step is to look at that perspective and translate that into actual numbers. So getting help from a CPA that will allow that will clean up he or she will clean up the books and make sure the P&L is understandable to a buyer, that the financial trends are very clear. There are things like inventory that need to be accounted for properly. So all of that takes time, and the sooner you get started, the better off you're going to be. And then finally, the team.
Let me stop you here, because you made a very, very good point that I've been talking about for years to all of you. You have to have inventory on your balance sheet. You have to properly account for the expenses that you have that are material expenses versus inventory. And if those of you who have grown more than $1 million and you don't have inventory on your balance sheet, it is painful to put it on. So, okay, sorry. Now you can do the finally.
No worries. No, that's a great point, Ruth. I was going to say, looking at the P&L and making sure that your business is positioned for long-term success through recurring revenue and the financials are clean, I would say those are table stakes. What the entrepreneur should also think about is the team, right? At the end of the day, you want to transition your business to someone that's going to take care of your customers and employees. While you don't want to go around telling your employees that you are going to sell the business, you need to bring some key leaders in the business in the loop and have a candid conversation with them about the fact that you are nearing, retirement, that you're thinking about it, and that you are considering transitioning the business to a different owner. The more you keep your employees in the loop and are candid about it, while it might seem a little daunting, it might seem a little scary as to how they will react, they would appreciate that. Oftentimes what we have seen is if the employees feel like they sort of got blindsided by a transaction and only get to know about that on the day of closing, that feeling can hurt some employees, and they may decide to go somewhere else, or they may feel like their loyalty was not respected. So it's a good idea for you to, in a very honest but measured way, bring them in the loop, not to scare them, but tell them that this is the need of the business to take the business from where it is today to the next level. This transition is necessary, and involve them in the process and make them a part of the endeavor, because at the end of the day, it's their future. It's also, it's important that some key leaders of the business weigh in on who your potential transition partner or buyer is going to be. So those are the high level parameters I would think about. And then one last point, more transaction oriented, is it is very important that you choose the attorneys properly. You would need a specialist here, M&A attorney that has done this before, and CPA. That's going to be kind of your core team. CPA, attorney, and your management team would be your pillars that you would use to make a successful transition.
Cool. All right. When we get back from break, let's dive into a little bit of some of these, and we'll talk about how to address your team. We'll talk about some of the horror stories I've seen with CPAs and attorneys, not necessarily with the near you experience, but just overall in transitioning businesses and things that you might watch out for. So thanks for listening to Contractor Sense. We will be right back.
Do you ever have warranty leak issues? One of Ruth King's clients did about 4 years ago. Thousands of dollars in expense and unhappy customers. She solved this problem for him though. How? With a leak letter that every customer must sign when a service technician discovers a refrigerant leak. Once they implemented the letter, there were no more warranty leak headaches. No warranty leak callbacks. Happier customers. The surprising result was more replacement sales too. To get a copy of the leak letter for free, just send Ruth an email at ruthking@hvacchannel.tv. That's ruthking@hvacchannel.tv.
You can't. That's what my daughter Kate told me when I said I wanted to make financials fun. The gauntlet was laid down. The red blanket was waved in front of the bowl. Ronan the Rubber Duck was born. This ebook is a whimsical look at financials from a duck's perspective. To get this fun, easy-to-read Kindle book, go to Amazon and search for Ronan the Rubber Duck Dives into Financials. That's RONAN. The Rubber Duck dives into financials. Let me know if I made financials fun for you. Welcome back. Thank you for listening to Contractor Sense. We've been talking about the getting ready for sale or getting ready for succession process. And Ashish, at the end of the first segment of this, you said talk to your employees about it because you don't want them blindsided. And I totally agree with that. But how do you have that conversation?
It's a great point, Ruth, and it's not easy, right? I'll start with that because the general perception is no matter how big or small the business, the perception is that when a company gets taken over or acquired, there is a lot of layoffs and people are worried about their jobs. A lot of these employees value the small business culture that was built by the entrepreneur. So it's a sensitive topic, and I think the first step is educating them, right? That this is not a bad thing. It's necessary for the future of the company, and the employee's future is tied to the future of the company. So educating them, I think bringing on someone like you, Ruth, is a fantastic idea to talk about why a company has to change hands from one owner to another. And it has to do with the fact that the old ownership may have hit a wall in terms of bandwidth or have a life event or are thinking about retiring. So that education process, I think, is very, very critical so that there is no shock, right? About suddenly the old owner transitioning out. The second step in my mind is making sure that they know very clearly the objective of this process is not necessarily to just sell the company and sail off, right? Because it's a service business. All contractor M&A transactions, it's very important that the seller participates in the transition process so that the employees and customers are taken care of. We take that very seriously at NearU, and we in fact move most of our transitioning sellers onto a founders council so that they can kind of be involved in a more passive way to ensure that the company's customers and employees are taken care of. So making them understand that this is not about pulling a plug and then suddenly some new entity is going to come in and change things upside down for them. Depending on who the buyer is, the outcomes will be different. I cannot speak for others, but at NearU, we take great pride in the fact that our transitions, we don't rush people into anything. We try to take the approach that slow is safe and safe is fast in this journey, mainly to ensure that employees are able to successfully onboard with the new ownership. And then we want to empower those employees to actually implement positive forward-looking changes that we want to make if we need to change anything. And so helping them understand that there is going to be a lot of support, there is going to be a lot of holding the hands during this transition, and no one should be unnecessarily worried about their job. No one should be unnecessarily worried about benefits going away or anything crazy happening to their status quo. It's extremely critical. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're doing this with a closed circle of leaders that can fully digest this, because not everyone is going to be able to rationalize what you tell them. So identifying who those leaders are, so they become the brand ambassadors of this transition. When the day comes to close the deal, they then talk to their teams and so on. So that is the utopian scenario. Now, depending on company to company, this will change. But that, I tried to cram down a lot of things in 1.5 minutes.
Sure. But and the reality is let's assume that you're going to transition the company to your children. Everybody in the company already knows it. I mean, it's always a thought that, all right, you're going to go someday and your kids are going to be running it, or whomever, friends, whatever it is. And so some of your employees may not want your kids, may not respect your kids. Unfortunately, I've seen it. When kids take over, people leave. Other situations happen where kids take over, they've been groomed properly. They're not considering the business as their personal checkbook. so to speak, and they actually do really well and take the business and do phenomenally well with it. I've seen it both ways. So, Ashish, from the perspective of, talking to people, I want to go through the advisor piece, because I have seen CPAs, I have seen attorneys try to screw up deals because they're going to be out of a customer. And I think that, out of the customer is my way of looking at it. But I don't think they have had the interests of the company at heart. They had their interests at heart. So, how do we prevent something like that happening?
That is very common, Ruth, and it's a great point. And I've seen a lot of fellow contractors have that issue in the past as we looked at different deals. I think the key there is to trust your counterparty, right? And that's why it's very important to work with people that have integrity and honesty. And because you're taking a leap of faith during the process itself. So you need to do your work to vet who you want to really work with as you're considering selling your business. If they have a deep balance sheet and just have a big checkbook that are coming in and gonna buy your business, but their core values are not aligned with yours and you can't quite trust them, that is when some other stakeholders can take disadvantage of your state of mind, where you are spending a ton of time on a deal and then it doesn't go through because the attorneys brought up something last minute and both sides could not work out a deal in good faith. So if you work with a trusted counterparty, meaning a trusted buyer, potential buyer, that has transparency in their process, is willing to walk you through the steps in a fashion that you will understand, given that most contractors have now done this before in their lives, and the buyer needs to understand and appreciate that and not take disadvantage of it. They actually need to educate the sellers so that they are not overwhelmed and don't take are not like you said, screwed by the advisors. So that vetting the buyer upfront is extremely important in my mind. And interview a few people, right? Like, just don't work with the CPA that you know from the last 40 years. Maybe they are not the right CPA to think about from a transaction perspective. So find an independent CPA. There's a lot of CPAs that will be willing to take a transaction fee. There's a lot of attorneys that will be willing to take a transaction fee. And the other stakeholder, Ruth, you didn't talk about is brokers, right?
Oh, yeah. We have 30 seconds. Okay, talk about brokers in 30 seconds.
Yes. But brokers, if you're working with a broker, just make sure that you read your contract properly and really get to know them personally so you understand what value they're going to add, and don't want them to inflate your expectations on pricing, because that can leave you hanging in the market for a while and not get a deal done because they just told you the wrong price. So there is no formula here. And I'll just close out with saying that I'm going to be conducting a few webinars here in some markets that we operate in the North and South Carolina markets. And people are welcome to run those webinars and we can dive deeper into some of these details. But at a high level, being alert, being watchful, and really being clear-eyed about who you're choosing to be your partner and what track record they have and your counterparty is extremely important so that you don't get blindsided.
Absolutely. So you and I have seen some horror stories. Even before I met you, I'd seen some horror stories, and I've seen some really good situations too. So Ashish, I'm looking forward to part 2, where we're really going to talk through an overall process to go from, okay, I'm interested, to, okay, the check's in my bank account. So it's a long process and can take and be very, very frustrating at times for both sides. So thanks for joining us. And
thanks for having me. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. Choose one thing that you discovered and implement it in your business. These ideas, tactics, and strategies help you make more money, have more free time, and give back. If you like today's program, spread the word. Please review this podcast on any device you're listening to it on. Help a fellow contractor make more money too. For comments or questions, call me at 770-729-0258 or email Ruth King at hvacchannel.tv. Thanks for listening. Have a great and profitable day. Now